On today's Locked On Texan podcast, the Texans defense is legit, and we talk more from training camp day 15.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Thursday episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you are new to the Locked On Texan podcast, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, along with subscribing on YouTube as well. Make sure you leave us a good old comment. If you are one of our returning listeners and family members, thank you for coming back as we cover your team today. Joint practice is kicked off on Wednesday. And guess what we had? Another one. We had another fight. These are some of the things that you want to get excited for and want to hear. The guys that did not practice on Wednesday, Hassan Ridgeway, Christian Kirksey, both were out hamstring, along with Brevin Jordan, who did not practice. Brendan Hill did not practice due to a hamstring injury. Thomas Booker, a guy who's been losing out, I think, on valuable time and reps. He also did not practice due to that wrist. Of course, Titus Howard was out with the hand surgery. Case Keenum, Jerry Wayne also did not practice on Wednesday as well. After practice, DeMeco Ryans' head coach said that today was an effective practice for both sides, Cody. That Texans defense, let's dive into that. What was going on Wednesday?
The Houston Texans did something that I talked about on yesterday, and that is staying consistent with everything that I've been praising them for through the first 14 days of training camp. And with the Miami Dolphins inside the Houston Texans training facility, it was the same. I'm going to start with that defensive line. I did not have them recording a sack during 11-on-11 play. However, they did a really good job creating pressure on Miami's front five. And not only that, John, I know you have some concerns about Will Anderson Jr., and I'm going to let you go into your evaluation on Anderson. However, what I would say, what I like most about Will, and this is something that I have seen throughout OTAs, mandatory minicamp, training camp, when he is able to use his speed coming off the line of scrimmage, 9 times out of 10, he's going to win that one-on-one battle. And that is what we saw, because majority of the time when he was out there, he was going up against Dolphins tackle Austin Jackson. Once again, using his speed, he's going to have an opportunity to win that. When you take a look at this linebacking core, this secondary unit, John, last year, the Texans gave up several big plays down the field. They haven't really done that throughout training camp and against the Miami Dolphins, especially when you know how that offense love how to utilize their speed to attack their opponents downfield. The Texans, day one of joint practices, linebacking core, secondary, did not give up a play downfield. And what I noticed is the linebackers and the safety units did a really good job making sure that they are always communicating with one another prior to the snaps. And I think that has played a major role into why this Texans defense has looked so good. And speaking of this linebacking core, you already talked about your guy, Christian Harris, came away with not only his first interception of training camp, but it resulted in the first of 2 pick sixes for the Houston Texans. And of course, the biggest highlight of the day, Jalen Pitre, literally 48 hours after he told us on his media availability that he wants to regain his notion as a ball hawk. Because remember, this is a guy who recorded a team high 5 interceptions last year. So far throughout training camp, he has not recorded an interception. He said he wanted to get that going again, and he did. By far my favorite highlight of training camp, as a matter of fact, because I had a clear shot of Jalen Pitre picking off Tua, completing the pick 6. Matter of fact, if I could just set up the scene really quick, it was AD from Houston Round Ball Review, myself, Clint Sterner from Sports Radio 610, and Big Sarge. We all standing in the line. Jalen Pitre reads the play, picks it off, runs the defensive touchdown, and after he scores while celebrating, he screams out, "Get the F out of here," and go home. Team celebrating, runs off the practice field. That Houston Texans defense, man, I know that's something I just literally just keep raving about, but like I mentioned, that is something that I wanted to see in this very first day of joint practices against Miami, because when you're going up against your own team, especially when your own team has a rookie quarterback who is still trying to get adjusted and everything else in between, you could kind of overvaluate the performance of this defense. But like I mentioned, man, everything that I've been seeing throughout the first 14 days, matter of fact, dating all the way back to OTAs, mandatory minicamp, I've seen it against the Miami Dolphins.
The way Jalen Pitre practices every single day, it doesn't surprise me when he makes a big play. All right. It's expected because that's what he does every day. He's not going to surprise you with a wild play because that's who he is. He's consistent in his preparation, and it shows when it's time to line up and compete. He's the same guy he always is. So it's very exciting for the entire team when all eyes are on us, and to see him step up and make a play like that, that's exciting and uplifting for our entire team.
Now, this is something I can't wait to get killed for in the comments. I know it's coming, but I got to talk about some of my concerns when I see and I look at Will Anderson, a guy that I really do like. By the way, I don't believe it was a mistake for Houston to trade up for him. When I look at Will Anderson, he has a very good get off the ball speed. The way that once that ball snaps, one of his best attributes, along with being able to get that tackle for loss, but is being able to beat his man to the point of attack. I love that. I love his bull rush ability. If you go back and watch his tape at Alabama, you saw how often and early he was to quickly get into the chest of the defender at a good, decent pad level and bull rush his way to the backfield. These are some of the things that made him a great tackle for loss guy playing for Nick Saban in the Alabama defense. Nearly 60 tackle for losses in his 3-year career at Alabama, and he also has an amazing motor. But what I want to see him improve on is his development at becoming better at using his hands as a pass rusher once he gets engaged with the opposing offensive lineman. A lot of time I'm watching Will Anderson, going back to the rep at practice against Austin Jackson. A lot of times when I watch Will Anderson, I wonder to myself, what will he do when that bull rush doesn't work? And he gets great opportunities whenever Larry Tunsil is practicing, because there was a clip between Larry Tunsil, I think it was Jay Phillips for Miami. And at the end of that clip, Larry Tunsil just kind of, hey, man, what are you doing with one hand? So he's getting good reps against a top left in the NFL. But eventually, he's going to have to learn that the bull rush isn't the only way to the quarterback and develop using his hands as a pass rusher. He is not a natural, fluid pass rusher, a guy that you see win one-on-ones with his hands. But he can get there. I also believe that he needs to be better at bending his hips and using his hips as a pass rusher as well once he is engaged with the defender. These are some of the things that I believe under DeMeco Ryans he'll get better at over time, because the opportunities will be there in the AFC South. Jacksonville Jaguars, they have a shaky offensive line right now. The Tennessee Titans may have the even shakier offensive line right now. I'm still concerned, if I'm a Colts fan, about my offensive line in Indy. So he's going to have matchups to where I can beat this guy purely off getting off the ball fast, beating him with a bull rush, and having my motor just outwork him. That's going to be something that he's going to be able to do. But what's going to happen when he goes up against the Andrew Thomases of the world, the Trent Williams of the world? Those my man Ronnie Stanley, who I like for where is he at? In Kansas City right now. Those are going to be those opportunities to where his stat line may be 0-1-1, right? So getting better at just using his hands once he's engaged. That's something that I've been talking about since he was drafted. And again, his game right now is predicated around being able to quickly beat you off the line of scrimmage getting to where I want to go and overpowering you. That's why he's good at stopping the run. That's why you see him in the backfield a lot. He can stand up that tackle while bull rushing, figuring out what hole that running back is going to hit and get to that point. They traded up for you to be the moneymaker, for you to be the go-getter. And these are some of the things he just has to get better at. I believe he will again, but that's just what I'm seeing. That's no knock to his game right now. I want to see you get better, and I believe you can. Because if you're honest, if you look at his tape from college, these are some of the things that you've been wanting to see from him for a very long time. He did have, nearly 40 sacks in college, so I believe he's going to get after the quarterback. Just want to see him get better at the NFL level. You don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair, no drugs, no compromises, just better hair. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist tested and recommended hair growth supplement clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting root causes of thinning such as stress hormones, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health. Listen, this is what you need to do. And by the way, this works. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months of taking Nutrafol's men's hair growth supplement. To see the visible, thicker, healthier hair for a limited time only, make sure you visit Nutrafol.com/men. Enter promo code Locked On to receive $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, Nutrafol.com/men, and enter promo code Locked On NFL. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. If you guys are coming in the comments right now, thank you. I appreciate it. It can be no worse than finding out after years and years of lies I was not adopted. That blindside story is crazy. You guys are here to hear about the Houston Texans, your team every day here on the Locked On Texans podcast. Cody, yesterday we discussed the ups and downs quarterbacks go through when facing a Vic Fangio's defense, the coverage disguises, going to cover 4 to cover 6 to cover 3 to cover 2 and cover whatever, right? And how was CJ going to respond to that in their very first joint practice? Can you please let us in on that and what's going on Wednesday with CJ and the quarterback? By the way, CJ had a couple of good touchdowns. Tank Dale, is he becoming, I don't know, wide receiver 1? We'll talk about that. But what was going on Wednesday on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, the offense in general had an up and down day in general, but I would say, given everything that CJ had to work through, I would say that this was one of the most impressive days for CJ because I have him down for somewhere in the ballpark of 11 to 12 completions. And this is what he had to work through. A depleted offensive line that gave up nothing but pressures nearly the entire day, especially the interior of that offensive line, looking at Juice, looking at Kenyon Green. And as a matter of fact, if my math is correct, I also have him down for at least 4 sacks. And John, listeners and viewers, if this was a real game, we will be walking away from NRG Stadium saying to ourselves, Lord, please hurry up and get Titus Howard back on the field. And please let the Houston Texans get lucky at finding a center who is ready to start come day one. Juice has had his moments since the injury to Scott Quisenberry.
It was a rough day.
It was a rough day for that offensive line. Like I mentioned, it seemed like CJ Stroud had to deal with pressure every time he took a snap. However, what I love most about that was how he was able to work through the pressure because he was able to utilize his tight ends. He was able to use his legs, quick drop steps, making sure he finds his targets quick. And if the pockets was collapsing before he had an opportunity to find his targets, he was using his legs, rolling right, rolling left, making sure he hits his targets on the run. I love what CJ Stroud did on yesterday. And ladies and gentlemen, I know when you guys hear him trying to work through a depleted offensive line, I even love that even more so for CJ Stroud's development, because that is just going to get him more ready for this upcoming season, which means we are going to see a better version of CJ. And if you ask me, I think that CJ might have ended this quote unquote quarterback competition on yesterday, because everything that I just mentioned, Davis Mills went through the same thing. And he had arguably his worst day of training camp. He overthrew several of his receivers. He threw an interception to one of the Dolphins linebackers. I can't remember what his name was, but when he threw that interception, it was literally just the Dolphins linebacker in that area. And I'm just standing there thinking to myself, Davis, what are you doing? He did not handle the pressure really good. And I don't know what was going on with Davis Mills, but yesterday was not a great day for him. And when you look at CJ Stroud, I would say the one negative for him on yesterday was the fact that he failed to connect with any of his receivers with his deep ball pass attempts. However, outside of that, he looked very efficient. And I also want to mention this as well. CJ Stroud was also working with a wide receiving core that outside of Tank Dell did not look too good, because they dropped at least a handful of several catchable passes from both him and Davis Mills. So given everything that I just said, which was probably a negative for the offense, when you analyze and look at CJ Stroud as a whole, I think it was one of his most impressive days, because John, as we talked about on yesterday, not only is he still trying to go through his reads and get accustomed to the NFL level, but he's also playing against one of the best defensive coordinator in the league. And I saw Miami's defense just switching the coverages, and for him to go to the line of scrimmage and call several pre-snap motions, it just shows you that CJ Stroud is starting to find his niche on the NFL level.
You mentioned the wide receiver group who didn't have the best of days. It sounded like they didn't have a good day at all outside of Dale. Noah Brown did get in on the action. I know Robert Woods got in on the action. But a player that maybe in on the action, but Robert Woods made it catch a couple of catches. But the player that I think is also important to this passing attack, and please, by all means, let the listeners and myself know, how often did CJ not force a pass and took what the defense gave him? Listen, how was that connection between CJ and Dalton Schultz, who also had a very good day on Wednesday, who also, had an opportunity to separate himself for the rest of this skill position group, who also looked like at the end of the year, if not number one, maybe top 2 or 3 in targets for this team. How good of a player was Dalton Schultz against a very good defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, who likes to complicate things for quarterbacks?
No, don't ask me. Just listen to what Coach DeMeco Ryans had to say.
And what does Dalton mean to our team? I think it's that he provides a security blanket for the quarterback. Has really good hands. He's a guy you can rely on. He's good in protection when it's called upon him. So Dalton is just your pro's pro. He's consistent in his approach every day, and it's great to have Dalton on our team.
Welcome back in, ladies and gentlemen, to this Thursday installment of Locked On Texans. Some more quick takeaways from day 15 of training camp, which featured the first day of joint practices against the Miami Dolphins. We talked a lot about the offense in the last segment, and I do want to mention between Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary, it kind of get lost in the shuffle, but this run game is definitely going to be something very serious. As a matter of fact, I believe it was Dameon Pierce. He had an opportunity to record a rushing touchdown during red zone drills. And, the fact that even with a depleted offensive line, you have two running backs who still is going to find the smallest gaps needed in order to push the change, man. That is definitely something that I wanted to point out, especially when you compare it to last year, to where Dameon Pierce was your only reliable running back. This year, you have two not only reliable in the rushing attack, but both of them look very good, helping out with pass protection. Both of them helping out in the passing game. Like, just overall, just taking a look at both of those guys, man, that backfield is going to be really good in 2023.
This is something I also want to keep an eye out on, but with the wide receiver one conversation, I think becoming a little bit more clear as we get more of these preseason, opportunities. Game on Saturday, joint practices. As of right now, well, maybe it's not as clear, but it doesn't seem like Nico has himself to be the established wide receiver one on this team. And honestly, it does look like Tank Dell is kind of, he's working up their chart a little bit. So when I look at the wide receiver group, I think that may be the one position that I'm really going to pay attention to this weekend. You're going to have your starters out there. CJ is going to get more than 2 series. CJ is going to get more than 4 passing attempts, hopefully. So I cannot wait to just look at how this offense, whenever they do put the ball in the air, who's going to set themselves up, who's going to be the playmaker, and how the rest of the depth chart offensively for the wide receiver group, will be set up. Thank you guys for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans, and also give me a follow on Twitter as well at John_Hickman12. We got football. College football is in 10 days, 9 days now. So preseason, college football is around the corner. Smells like that time of year.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.